Welcome to the Eye of Power podcast. I'm your host, Tom Dardick. But this podcast is not about me. It's about you and your power. It's time to claim yours. Well, today we have a special Eye of Power podcast episode. This is actually the first time video episode where we're in the same physical space. So we look like a couple of peas in a pod here. This is Greg Dardick, Chief Technical Officer of Eye of Power. It's over the Thanksgiving holiday, so we happen to be in the same town and decided to take advantage of the opportunity to be together and create a special episode. So welcome, Greg.
Well, thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Super glad to be able to meet in person. Like you said, most of the time we're talking via Zooms and other things. So it's really nice to be in person here and a chance to share some of our vision today.
Absolutely. And that's what we'd like to do. We'd like to take the opportunity to sort of let you, as somebody who's interested in the Eye of Power model and world and approach, a little bit into the locker room to sort of see what it is that we see and why we're doing what we're doing, and just kind of share our vision as to what we think we might be able to do with the Eye of Power model and the partnerships we've formed and the kinds of value equation we think we might be able to offer to people.
Yeah. So Tom, why don't we start a little bit talking about what we see for the future? Like what's changing in the world right now? Why the Eye of Power? What's kind of landscape and the backdrop of what we think is changing, and for us to be competitive and be fulfilled in our careers.
Great question, Greg. I'm thinking a few major, almost tectonic plate shift kind of issues going on that I see, and I'll start maybe with something that's not so topical, but I've seen over the entire course of my professional career. And that is the telephone pole effect. And that is where you want to develop your people. You want to get a coach, or you want to make some sort of change. You want to learn something. You want to make some positive movement in some way. And so you see a course, a lecture, you bring a speaker in, a guru of some kind, or you do some sort of training or some sort of initiative. You maybe do a book club, read a book together, something that says, okay, we're going to learn and we're going to change and do something. And you probably know what I'm talking about here, because the telephone pole is whatever you do, you say, okay, this is great. We're going to apply this. I'm psyched about this. And then either 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, or 2 hours go by, and it's like it never happened.
Yeah. And listen, I think we've all been there. We've all had things going on, and you think about the pace of business, and there's so much is put on you to be able to do your basic work. So much is expected more of you. And I think that's the backdrop of the most costly thing in the world. I'm saying costly, but it's also opportunity, is that the amount of change that's going on is just massive. And so as employees, as people, the amount of information thrown at us is only getting more and more.
So it's getting harder.
So it's getting harder. Exactly. You think about what's coming up with the types of change that we see coming in workplaces with AI, with hyper competitiveness that happens, the ability for people to get into markets, the ability of people to start up businesses quickly. That competitive landscape changes, and that competition is what forces change. It forces you to act differently. And so some of the things in the past of companies where people acted and what worked in the past always kept working. That is tough in today's market, because things change and people's expectation of change is getting more and more. I mean, you think about phones. Like when phones came out, can you imagine buying a phone every year or two? That would be insanity to somebody.
Exactly.
And you think about what that means for companies and phone companies in terms of technology changes they've had to make. Apply that kind of across the spectrum, and we'll see that the need for change is high. And so our innate nature of change resistance sometimes makes it difficult. So we have a little bit of an odds going on right now. And so, I think that's a good backdrop for Eye of Power, because the basis of what's going on is how to deal with change, how to deal with growth.
Well, before we get into the meat and potatoes of that, I'm still thinking that the challenge is even more complicated than what we're laying out already, in the sense that of this, all those changes that you just pointed to, and the overall sort of problem of the habit, right? Because what I was saying earlier about you try something new and you get excited about it, but then there's some sort of reversion to mean, or you kind of you lose maybe 90% of what it is that you tried to gain, and you go sort of hopefully retain a little bit. But what happens is you get this, and you might have it in your workforce where, oh, this is the next thing. Okay, what new thing is this? And times all those changes
Yeah.
you're pointing to. And I think there's a current of change resistance that makes it difficult for leaders. And maybe they get a little bit of help by the fact that I think more and more people are
Yeah.
recognizing what you
Yeah.
said, but it's still the psychology of it doesn't change.
Yeah.
People are people, no matter what happens technologically.
And that's true. And that's a good point because ultimately it is that change resistance. There's so much, and that's what I kind of get back to the so much information. What information is valuable and what information is not.
Yeah.
And that's what's difficult at times. And especially when you start looking at these people dynamics, because it is, as you said, Tom, it's very complicated. And so there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of things that are going on. There's things that work for a while and fall apart. One of the things that a lesson I learned on and I told people is that entropy happens,
Yeah.
and that whether you want it or not, things fall apart.
Yeah.
And so you think about companies' tendency to go from centralized to decentralized, decentralized to centralized. Why do they do that? They do that because of entropy.
Yeah.
Things, become centralized, things become bureaucratic, you can't work anymore, you can't get a decision, things get done, you have to decentralize to start getting efficiency. What happens when you start decentralizing? Everybody starts doing their own things. Nobody's working together. Everybody's got their own fiefdoms. Now things don't work. So you have to kind of come back together. And things tend to kind of cycle that way.
Yeah.
And so you think about that complexity. Now you put that change cycles, and that's what I was kind of talking about earlier. These change cycles are happening quicker and quicker.
Mm.
So you'd have decades of companies acting this way. Now things are happening just insanely. The cycle is just increasing.
Months or years,
Exactly.
years or months.
Exactly.
Yeah. And those dynamics are tough as it relates to the job of leadership, right? Because
Yeah.
what is a job of a leader? In my opinion, it's to have a vision, have a willpower to make that vision happen, and then to align people as it relates to their personal purpose to be compatible with that shared
Yeah.
vision, and then nurture
Yeah.
that process that says, okay, together we do this, and this is your special superpower and
Yeah.
how you contribute,
Yeah.
and great. And then what you were just pointing to, that those shifting dynamics make that even more challenging.
Yeah.
Now, with those challenges come opportunity.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, Tom, as you talk about, and you kind of mentioned the ability to work together and piece put together as opportunity. And that really is when we talk about it is the ability of people to work effectively, and grow and deal around this dynamic of change. How do you get teams really working together? How do you get people working together in ways that really harness their ability and allow the companies to grow and people to grow?
And it's funny you use that language, Greg, because one of my sayings that I say to business leaders when I'm talking to them is, no matter what business you're in the people development business.
Absolutely.
And that's because of this change we're talking about. In other
Yeah.
words, no one has the luxury of sitting there on the laurels of their past achievements and the skills they've built up to now. Why? Because the world's moving.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to change. The trope that I see a lot is the person who's sort of near retirement, who's
Yeah.
very accomplished, great at what they do, and they're saying, "Hey, I don't have to do any of this stuff. This isn't for me.
Yeah.
I've only got 2 or 3 more years, or whatever
Yeah.
it might be." Whether it's 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is, I think that's a especially deadly and
Yeah.
growing more
Yeah.
deadly
Yeah.
mindset and
Yeah.
apt to fall into.
It is, but you think about it is that everything has a niche somewhere. You could think of an opportunity of a piece of business that is running down, looking at this, kind of going in a different way. You could have the right mindset, and I think that's something that's interesting to think about. Is there's a purpose for a mindset of almost any type that can find purpose,
Mhm.
and so it's really understanding what those are and what does that mean moving forward. But certainly, a non-growth mindset is difficult in business these days. Basically, the stuff I was talking about the nature of change makes that difficult. But doesn't mean that there's not still opportunity for people who are in that mindset.
Well, we're right along another common idea that I think is becoming more and more prevalent in the world of work, and that is the nature of work itself.
Yeah.
because you were pointing to it as AI and automation evolves and becomes more and more capable, more and more able to not only mimic or replace, but perhaps even exceed human capacity. Now, what are we working for? What do I need you for if I can just get a routine that doesn't sleep, doesn't need vacation, doesn't need paid, doesn't need a break? Uh, what are we working together for? And whenever I think of this concept, I'm always thinking about the Star Trek world of the
Yeah,
next generation. Because there's a particular episode where the person in the 20th century is like this Texas oil
yeah,
man. He's like, okay, it's 205 or it's 300 years later, and my portfolio must be worth $1 trillion. And he's crestfallen when Picard says, "Yeah, we don't use money anymore." And he's dumbfounded by the concept. Like, why would anybody do anything if you
right.
don't pay them? He said, "We work to better ourselves." And I think we're moving in that direction.
Yeah,
And what does that mean? That means growth, but
yeah,
it also means experience, I think. And that's
yeah,
that's the ability to be fulfilled
yeah,
and to
yeah,
to find our superpower and use it. In the I Power model, we talk about that a lot in the purpose quadrant,
yeah,
where it's you're finding your gifts,
yeah,
developing them,
yeah.
and finding ways to use them
And
with each other.
and let's hit back on that point. You said, like, why have a person? Because one of the things I think Tom and I both believe is that all of us have unique abilities. We're all special individuals that can bring something to the table that nobody else can bring, and that includes another AI. And so it's really about figuring out your purpose, your alignment of your things and your skills that you have, your interests, where you won't even grow. Maybe you have skills you haven't even thought about, that you haven't tapped into yet. And it's really about aligning those things with purpose with other teams and other people. How do I find that alignment? Where do things match in those things? And where there's not alignment, because sometimes you need to change. And sometimes you're in the wrong organization. It was right for a while, but it's not right for you anymore. And this is a scary thing and a very, I would say, adult thing to think about in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that gets to that purpose change. We're working together because we want to.
Yep.
There's a purpose, there's a fulfillment.
So that brings in a new dynamic from a leader's perspective,
Hmm.
right? You're not only you're in the alignment business, but you're in the fulfillment business.
Right.
And I'd say if we had a mission as I Power LLC, it's to be in the fulfillment business.
Yeah.
We talk about a lot about engagement, but engagement and fulfillment, they're related things.
Yeah.
But really what it is, it's what you were just talking about with, look, we're working together. I feel seen,
Yep.
recognized, appreciated for not just because I'm a dude sitting
Right.
here, but you see me, the individual, and my particular skills,
Yeah.
appreciate them,
Yep.
value them. And that's where I think our fulfillment comes from, is
Yeah.
where we are seen for the person we actually are.
Yeah. And not just the person we are, it's our interactions with people because, synergies, um, your ability to create things that you would never create yourself because you're with other people
That's
that bring
right.
that stuff out. One of the things that we always kind of talk about, we talk about this jam gene growing up. Tom and I are both musicians. And one of the things
There's an
we love
episode
about
way
playing,
back in the early parts of the iPower podcast where it's the
yeah,
Jam Gene episode.
but that's one things about working with teams. It's this ability to create things that no one person would create themselves.
Yeah.
And again, you think about all of us being unique. Now we create other uniqueness that we blend together that will create things that would never be created, never accomplished, and tap into those powers.
Yeah, and that is a deep need. That's not a made up
Yeah,
luxury. That's actually something
yeah,
that is deep within us.
yeah,
And I think it happened, if you go back to the human animal,
yeah,
in the tribal world, it was more naturally happening, right? Things were simple. Everybody had to do everything in a
yeah,
way. And that those personalities kind of came through.
yeah. Well, you think about survival and the nature of those things. You know,
You
you
know,
know,
you have a
you,
lot of
you didn't have
downtime
a
to
lot
worry
of
about.
downtime to worry about these things, and so the stakes are higher. You need to work together to survive.
Yeah.
And so, in a world where we have luxury and we have problems that are in relative terms compared to surviving and being able to, whether you're going to have food to eat or whether you're going to have a shelter, you're going to have all these other things. We have the luxury of having a lot of other problems, but that is what's amazing about being in the world today is your ability to have your imagination is very unlimited.
Absolutely. So let's get back into how we come alongside leaders and help them with the overall challenge of being able to provide a vision, create alignment,
Yeah.
and provide this sort of culture.
Yeah.
To me, one of the things that define the highest level of organization, the best organizations, however you want to measure it, highest performing, best places to work, longevity,
Yeah.
turnover, whatever metric you want to
Yeah.
use. There's some things that they tend to have in common.
Yeah.
And one thing is tends to be merit based.
Yeah.
It tends to be where you're contributing. Now, the currency of that merit and how people contribute, that can be a variable. The idea that you're not just there out of a sense of entitlement being carried, but you are a contributor and
Absolutely.
appreciated for that contribution. That's one thing. And so how do you get to that place? Well, the two ingredients best I can tell is you have to have mutual respect and you have to have
Yeah.
trust. Trust and respect, I think, are the factors that cannot be, they're the indispensable qualities of
Yeah.
the highest culture. There's a problem with those things. Super, super hard to build, super, super easy to destroy.
Yeah.
And it
And
doesn't take much.
and there's a background on, underneath all of that, Tom, and that's why you together. What's the purpose? Why are we here? What's the purpose of this company? Who are we serving?
Yeah.
And getting alignment and understanding of that is key because to be a team with a goal, you need to understand what that is, what that means. And as I said before, that can change. That makes it more complicated.
Yeah. I think that's something that can change, but I think there's some fundamentals that
The-
have to stay in place
the-
for
the-
people to
There,
stay aligned.
there are, but all I'm saying is that who you're serving, their needs change. So
Right.
who are you thinking you're serving and why changes, and that's all I'm saying is that
Okay.
there's a dynamic there, which is a thing that's not obvious sometimes because people get caught up in exactly what you're saying, Tom. They get caught up in thinking about this is why we're here, exactly what we're here, and they
Yes.
miss a bigger picture because
They
of
can be
that.
calcified
They can be
that way.
calcified that way.
Yeah. So, okay. So you are a business leader and you recognize all that we've been talking about and you say, okay, what am I supposed to do about it?
Yeah,
What are your options? What do you do? And we can talk a little bit about that in the general and then get into the specific as to what our answer is for
yeah,
that. But the the first thing you're doing is you're number one, you're clear, right?
yeah,
You can articulate exactly what we're talking
yeah,
about as it relates to your organization.
yeah,
Number two, you're great communicating, right?
yeah,
You're able to do that with everybody in their terms that mean something to them
yeah,
specifically. So you need to be able to not only have an overall mission statement kind of
yeah,
a thing, but also put that into the terms for each person that gives them meaning. Yesterday we were talking about I forget who was it you, Greg, who said about Elon Musk's approach in his organization? Maybe it was
no,
Scott.
it wasn't me.
Okay, family gathering, we're talking about this, and somebody was talking about Musk's approach early, especially early on as he was building his companies, where he would meet with nearly everybody in the
Yeah,
organization and just talk to them, what's going on? What are you
right,
doing? And in a way, maybe in a big brothery sort of way to say, okay, what are you doing? If it's not good, you're gonna either be changed, removed, whatever. But it was more along the lines of alignment, more along the lines of
yeah,
connecting to the bigger picture and speaking in terms that mean something to that person.
yeah. And I think that's a good because the underlay of that is you said earlier, Tom, is trust.
Yeah.
And so it's about building an alignment. And you think about how a great a thing that is when a leader in the company can talk to anybody in the company and have a way that it's a trust thing and it's alignment, it's a refocus of what's going on.
Yeah,
And
you imagine somebody who's just starting in one of his companies and they feel like they have access to now the richest man in the world, but
right,
that's there's smaller companies where the CEO couldn't tell you the names of
yeah,
more than 20 people
yeah.
around them.
And so, and to your point about the leader's role in these things and looking at that. And so that is of trust and building and connection, right? So there's a two-way connection. It's your ability to communicate vision as Elon was doing and do those things, but it's also letting communication flow the other way. and the
That's right.
power of that.
That's
And
right.
so in meeting with vast numbers in the teams and looking at that, you're really allowing that communication back to understand where is their communication gaps, where are things that are going on. It's really finding those people who know what's going on, have inklings. Do you have an organization that is willing to hear what's going wrong? Do you have an organization that's willing to deal with things that are going against what your vision is,
Right.
going against what you're saying? Are you willing to sit there and listen to somebody say, I don't believe in what you're saying, and why?
Not only willing to listen, but appreciate the fact that they're sharing
Exactly.
what they're,
Exactly.
yeah, you want to hear the
And
bad
so
news or
that's
the,
high level of trust because that's somebody who's risking their job, their, potentially other things and giving information. And are you a type of leader that is able to really get the best of that, look at that and deal with that? And it's a double-edged sword too on these things because you have a place you're trying to go and move people to. And so when you have people non-confident about that, chirping around the scenes of what's going on, how do you deal with those things?
what I always say is you have two choices. You can change your people or you can change your people. One's up to them, one's up to you. So
Right.
you give, and that maybe that circles back to what we were talking about earlier about, okay, how do we feed that need for growth, that need for connection, feeling like we have that purpose. And
Right.
this is part of it, right? Is because it's not a tragedy if the alignment of the person no longer fits with the organization.
It's true.
The tragedy is keep them on,
Right.
right? But to let them go is not
Right.
the tragedy, right? Because they're
Right.
not going to be happy, and they're
Right.
also going to they're going
Right.
to diminish
Right.
the
And
culture.
and it might be an alignment of the role, right? Maybe their
It
role
might
should
be
be
the
to something
role.
else. And so, you're always looking at the bigger picture and really trying to find out what's going on in those things. And that's where real dialogue, real meaningful dialogue with people is important. And that's where growing and caring for your employees, the answer might be help them move on. The answer might be help them move on to another role. The answer might be, hey, there's a whole nother aspect of this role that we didn't think about that you could fulfill.
Well, that's high level when you can really
Yeah.
recognize the gifts of a person
Yeah.
and partner with them
Yeah.
in a way to optimize their ability to contribute.
Yeah. So let's kind of dig. So we're kind of going down a little more deep, Tom. So let's kind of dig into eye of power. How
Yeah.
does the eye of power help in this?
Well, the first thing we talked about was the alignment, and we also mentioned about change resistance. So we're dealing with human beings, and human beings have a tendency to work to get things aligned just so, figure things out, and then we tend to want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
And while we do dive into change and the opportunity for more and growth and all that, there's definitely a strain of I call it the tyranny of the to-do list, which is almost everybody you're ever going to meet is going to have more things on their to-do list than they have hours in the day to do
Yeah.
it. And then against the backdrop of what we were talking about earlier with the need for change and the pace of change, this creates a almost like a background radiation of anxiety in a way,
Yeah.
where if you're talking about working on some sort of change that's not directly on your to-do list, there's a bit of a resistance or a bit of a challenge as it relates to finding the time or feeling
Yeah.
like you're not taking away from a higher priority.
Yeah. That's a great point because I always called it the tyranny of the now. It's basically the
Okay,
same
same
thing,
thing, same thing.
and it is a balance of what energy am I putting to get what I'm doing now, and what energy am I putting as investments to get in the future.
That's right.
And
And
so when you look at those investments and you're trying to do the balance of those things, that's so important because we sit and think, and our natural state is to want to fill up all our capacity with doing something. Like I'm not working right if I'm not fully 100% baked and put in what's going on. And the truth of the matter is systems that are at 100% capacity fall apart.
yeah,
They're not, and that's what lean thinking helps us is really understand is that we need to have a little bit more flexibility in these things that are out there, and a little more autonomy, and a little more things to help us move forward and continue to grow.
yeah. You mentioned two things there I think are worth underscoring. When you use the term investment, I think that's a
Yeah,
really, really good thing for us to think about because if, who are the most successful investors? Who are the most the people that do the best financially? Just look financially specifically. Well, what they share is they spend their time on things that are going to pay off over time, things that are going to continually give a return.
Hmm.
And if you think about what we all share, we all have time, we all have the same amount of time. So how can somebody separate themselves from another person in terms of achievement or however metric you want to use? It's really what you're spending your time on. So you can either spend your time, waste your time, or invest your time, right? Those are your three
Yeah.
options. And the people who do better tend to invest their time. So the question is investing time. What are you investing in? So I think that's a really
It's a great point
big,
because,
important aspect of it.
and that's really one thing that the eye of power helps kind of flesh out when you look at those things.
Yeah, and yes. So let's put a fine point on it. What should you invest your time in? Well, we talked about change. We talked about the need for growth. That means you're going to have to do something a little different. You're going to have to get comfortable with doing things that are outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
This is a staple of the development business. Anybody, any coach you talk to, any mentor, any teacher, anybody you're going to learn from is going to tell you the same thing. Your growth lies outside your comfort zone. You're going to have to do things new, do things different than you normally would do. And when you're doing those things, you almost, in a way, you can look at it in a way where you can't even lose because you're going to learn.
Yeah.
You're going to have, you can mess up, you can make mistakes, and that's fine because those are very valuable growth opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great point you're making, Tom, is about the ability and tolerance for risk taking in companies, the ability for people to make mistakes and have room to make mistakes. And so some mistakes companies can't afford to make.
Right.
Some they can. And so a lot of the judgment of management and managers is around giving the right boundaries to let people make mistakes and understand what ramifications of those. Because if you create a culture that people are unafraid to make, are afraid to make mistakes, you're going to get a culture that is not very inventive. You're going to get a culture that is slow. You're going to create a culture that is not dynamic for growth.
I'm reminded of the story of, I think it was Tom Watson, early CEO of IBM.
Uh-huh.
You know the story I'm
I
talking
don't
about?
know if I do.
So he had a salesperson, this is, I think, in the 50s,
Yeah.
a salesperson who made a big blunder
Yeah.
on a big sale,
Yeah.
cost the company $1 million.
Yeah.
Back when $1 million seemed like a lot of money. uh, and he goes into the office and the salesman assumes he's going to get chewed out
Right.
and fired. And he said, well, I guess you're expecting my resignation. He said, and Watson says, resignation? I just invested $1 million in your education. Why would so point
Yeah.
being is that how you're framing mistakes and learning and so
Yeah.
forth. Not that you want your salespeople to go out and make $1 million
Right.
mistakes on a regular basis, but what you do is what you just pointed to.
Yeah.
You have a healthy relationship with what learning is and mistakes. Certain things, and really, if you think about it, clients don't expect perfection. They expect you to serve them, to be on their
Right.
side, right? To if when the inevitable things go wrong, that you are not hesitant to fix it, but can't wait to fix
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. And on top of that, what you want is, I think about the best partners I work with, you want transparency. You
Yeah.
want when there are challenges, you want to know early. You want to have a chance to influence. You want a chance for the best ideas to get on the table to respond to those
And
things.
again, the kind of culture you're pointing to where people are afraid of mistakes really is not good for transparency.
Exactly.
This is human nature. If you have an organization where you're struggling with trust issues and open communication, it's not that you're alone and making all kinds of mistakes yourself. This is how human beings behave. It takes something else,
Yeah.
something above to really lift this
Right.
into a higher level of culture. And our answer to that is you've got to have systems. You've got to have things in place
Yeah.
that constantly move people in the psychologically healthy direction and don't let them linger in the traps and the dark places that are the sibling rivalries or
Right.
the political
Right.
maneuverings and the sorts of foibles that people are going to bring to the table
Right.
that kill your culture.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what we do with the eye of power. One thing we've learned, Greg, is that you have to be very incremental. You know, some people in your team can just jump into the deep end and swim, and we can challenge them to look in the mirror and and face the darkest aspects of themselves. But I'd say that's the minority.
I agree.
And so what we need to do is sort of teach people almost how to doggy paddle. We start
Yeah.
in the shallow end of the pool for everybody, and get people just to get their face wet. Right?
Yeah.
Like not everybody's a swimmer. When I'm using this as a metaphor for personal growth, the
Yeah.
ability to look in the mirror, recognize what you're really seeing, recognize the opportunity where you're holding yourself back, or you have patterns that are blind spots that you're willing to
Yeah.
allow to come to the fore, so that you're a little bit better tomorrow than you were today.
Yeah.
And so that's we've learned to be very incremental with this. So one way we've done this is we've partnered with a company called Be Remote. Came basically from technology that allows people to solve some of the problems that crop up when we're not in the same physical space, when we have to work remote. And I actually do love remote, uh, the opportunity for
Yeah.
remote. We have companies and partners, people all over the world we're
Yep.
dealing with could never have done that before.
Nope.
So you get talent from all over the world working together, but there is a problem with it because there's no substitute for what we're doing right now.
Right.
You and I talking together in this
Yep.
same space is different than if we're on the Zoom together.
It's true.
We can feel a lot of energy and it goes almost unsaid, but it doesn't mean it's not real.
Right.
And I think almost anybody with a remote team understands this.
Yep.
And the Be Remote folks came up with a product called Reteam that's a application-based communication aid that has 8 different features that allow teams to come together and communicate more effectively and more meaningfully than they otherwise would.
Yeah.
When we saw it, we're saying, oh, this is perfect because this is a great way to get people to do incremental little things
Yeah.
to move in the right direction. So we get people sort of, I call it doggy paddling, but
Yeah.
it's I'll just ask you, anybody who's listening to us now, have you ever been in a meeting where 20% of the people take up 80% of the bandwidth? And almost every time people smile because they're like, what meeting isn't like that? Right. And this is because this is how humans are.
Yeah.
There's the certain percentage of people that feel like they feel fulfilled when they're getting the attention, or they feel like they're getting their agenda, and they're willing to take over the conversation or make sure they're heard down to the nth degree for whatever the motivation is, be it good, bad, or indifferent. And the problem with that, of course, is 80% of your people feel like they're underrepresented,
Yeah.
not heard, not seen, not appreciated. And this is a classic problem.
Yeah.
So Reteam came up with a great solution for that. And the idea is that we're sharing asynchronously,
Yeah.
via video, and we're able to put together a string which replaces a meeting. So you're getting a time benefit,
Yeah.
and you're getting a bandwidth benefit. So everybody is heard the same way. And that's just one example. But I say all that because these are things that we don't pay attention to. We don't necessarily know precisely what to do. And this is an example of a system or a technology or approach that can really help.
Right.
And so what we do is we start with little things, sharing what our favorite meal was, our last vacation, our picture of a sunset,
Yeah.
just sharing little things that help us connect
Right.
emotionally
Right.
and on a human level. And we just do that for a little bit, and then we just ramp it over time. And then at some point we start adding the Aya Power protocol. And the Aya Power protocol is a trip around the Aya Power model. In the beginning days, I would take the time to explain the psychology behind every single thing. And we've really changed that. We've evolved that.
We have, and a lot of that has to do with, like you said, Tom, is the ability to move just little small increments along the way, not having to invest in something so complicated and look at such a big picture to be able to start gaining benefit from. And
Right.
sometimes it just kind of gets in the way. People get overwhelmed. They look at things.
That's
Understand all of that. The idea is to just move on, sustain incremental actions.
that's it.
And the iPower is geared around weekly kind of looking at those things and thought exercises and actual exercises and things to do kind of move and guide you through those things to help to find, achieve, and unlock those potential in you.
Because what we've got, and this goes right back to the very beginning of our conversation. It's not what you say or what you read or what videos you watched or the content. I think the problem with the developmental business in general, training, education, the whole smear, it's all very focused on content. And while I'm as much a content junkie as the next person, that's why I was able to come up with something like the Eye of Power. But what I've learned is it's really not, that's not where the magic happens. The magic is in action. The magic is what you do. And it's that experiential
Yeah,
of what you're actually doing during a day.
right.
So that sustained incremental action is the little things that sustained you're going to do over time, like compound interest, little things that you do and sustain over long periods of time. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
It's not glamorous. It's not.
No, it's not. And you know, the thing about that is breaking things down, breaking your goals into small little things. And one of the things very important to us, we recognize, as we talked about before, our demands for our time is so huge.
Yeah.
Our demand for attention is so huge. And if you don't create things in ways that allow it to happen in small little amounts, it's a difficult ask for people and companies.
That's right. So you have to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And so one person's incremental action is not going to be the same as another person's. So that requires sort of a degree of customization. So
Yeah.
that's one problem. There's another problem that we have, and that is that we cannot see our own blind spots.
Yeah.
So for that reason, the developmental task is really not a solo sport.
Right.
And so what we do with the protocol is we team up into having growth partners. And so the growth partner helps us see our blind spots. There's an accountability function there, but it's really a supportive function.
Yeah.
Right? You get the attaboy or the attagirl. You feel
Yep.
seen, recognized. You work through issues with another person that sees that and supports that, and that has the effect of, number one, helping the person move. Number two, it creates deep, meaningful bonds between
Yeah.
people. And I think if you want to build the best organization you possibly can, it's very handy to have your people invested in one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's about building high functioning teams. High functioning, you know, I saw a video once. It was a pretty good video talking about how strangers don't team
Right.
because high performing teams have high degrees of trust.
Yeah.
And so this helps build that trust in an organization.
So the protocol and the system that we use to sustain and deliver, best way I know
Yeah.
of getting these things systematized into the culture that's just part of the
Yep.
landscape. That to get that here in this place, we're constantly working on something.
Yep.
It's small, it's not big. We're just doing something new and different every week
Yep.
and constantly growing that comfort zone, becoming literally becoming a bigger person, a bigger, more capable person. And that function alone goes back to what I'd say the businesses that we have together. When
Yeah.
AI can do tasks, what's the currency going to be?
Right.
The currency is going to be the ability to be a bigger and better person,
Yeah.
right? And not only do it for yourself, but do it with other
Yeah.
people, because that's where the magic happens.
Yep.
We by ourselves, we don't find much
Yeah.
meaning.
Right. And it ties back to really the bigger picture we talked about it earlier. And that is having these teams really function, align together, find purpose, grow, and unlock potential.
All of this sounds great, Greg. It's absolutely wonderful. In our experience, it's not enough by itself,
Right.
because what happens in the real world, what happens is you have all kinds of different personalities, different levels of sophistication among managers and executives and ownership. And so some ground is more fertile than others,
Yeah.
and you have different levels of resistance to change or something new. Maybe you're in a team where you've tried a million things and
Yeah.
everybody's going to say, well, this is just another thing. I don't really have to do this.
Yeah.
And so there's another component to that I think is needed for success. And that is to make sure that the leaders are developed to the point where they are, I call it pig committed rather than chicken committed.
Right.
Right. Like, and the difference, of course, is the breakfast
Right.
equation, right? Chickens can give eggs, pigs committed,
Yep.
right? That's a real commitment. And so almost anything we do in the world, everything's a test. And it's a test of will. It's a test of how bad do you want it. If you want something, you can almost get if you're dreaming of something, it's within your reach, and the world's just going to test you. How much of a commitment are you willing to
Yeah.
make to it?
Yeah.
And so if you want to reach the highest levels of culture and achievement and an organization that's literally world class where people can't wait to come in,
Yeah.
whether it's as an employee or a customer or a vendor, whatever it is, it's possible. No matter who you are, you can get there.
Yeah.
But
And I think about this, Tom, too, and you put it in the frame of companies and what they struggle with. And you think
companies or
about and
organizations,
organizations, and you think about one of the things is how I'm growing my people. You think about reviews that you do with people. Obviously we always have goals of growth in those things, but they tend to be very flat. They tend to be, I talk about it here and that's it. I may talk about one other time. This is a system that is really building that growth in all the time, and that's kind of one leg that I think management can really understand and
yeah,
kind of lean into and understand, because it's a benefit for not only their people they're doing, it's a benefit for themselves and their role, because it allows channels of communication and allows channels of growth in ways that they might not be able to achieve otherwise.
yes, that's true. I mean, that's one of the things that bothers me so much when I encounter it in the workplace is the annual review where that people are,
Yeah.
they've met one time or maybe they do it quarterly or monthly, but
Right.
they have these reviews and they go through and it's very cursory, very around the task, and it's almost pro
Yeah,
forma.
right. And they might have weekly or biweekly meetings with people, but it's all about the now, the tyranny of the now, all the discussions on the tyranny of the now.
Yes,
It's not, we're not carving out time for these growth things.
the
And
investment
the
side of it.
investments, and then how in the investments and understanding how those investments are starting to pay off.
Yeah, and getting excited about the unknown future, really.
Yeah.
Because the reason to grow is because it requires a little bit of humility. Like we don't actually know what's going to happen next
Yeah.
year, right? And so to pretend or to operate as though we do can be fraught with a little bit of
Yeah.
danger, and you're making assumptions. So that's
Yep.
one big thing is making assumptions. And as soon as you make an assumption, which we all have to make, I mean, again, this sort of goes back to that dichotomy of of the manager
Yeah.
knowing how big a mistake to allow and how
Yeah.
much is like non-negotiable. It's the
Right.
same kind of judgment aspect where we need the wisdom to be able to see,
Yeah.
okay, what
Yeah.
do I need to ask another question about?
Right.
What am I assuming here
Right.
that I shouldn't be?
Right. And Tom, you're kind of hitting on this earlier, is that the eye of power alone is a protocol that puts into place. We have complicated systems that are underneath there. And so one of the things that we see the value in bringing to the table and helping with organizations is really helping to understand and set and lay that leadership framework against the eye of power,
Yeah.
and really helping those companies to grow.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a partnership as it relates to the style and the
Yeah.
approach. So there's a consultative
Yeah.
aspect of that we get into, and the other thing is that I think is very important as it relates to our overall discussion here is it makes no sense to spend a lot of energy pounding a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
And I think we do that a lot. And we do it because we don't know any better and we're making assumptions.
Yeah.
And so this is when the person is not that good a fit, or or a lot of times here's where really I find in the world, I am generally brought in to work with what I call asterisk people.
Yeah.
And asterisk people are the people that are really good at something, so good that you don't really want to lose them or fire them
Yeah.
or move them. But but there's something that we can't tolerate,
Right.
the asterisks. And so they'll bring people like me in to try to help change that.
Right.
And sometimes, and the truth is, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't,
That is the truth.
because it's up to the person whether they want to change or not. No
Yeah.
matter what you do,
Yeah.
that's who's in charge. And a great people strategy is always going to have some features to it, and the features is you're getting the fit right from the get-go. And asterisk people generally are high performers. They're generally pretty good at things because otherwise you could just move on and you wouldn't worry about it. So you want to get good people. But if you get somebody who's really good in something and the fit isn't quite right, now you got a problem.
Yeah.
And so you need systems in place to make sure you're getting your people strategy correct. And so this fits into the eye of power as it relates to the that judgment of, okay, do I invest in this person staying in this role? Do they need to move laterally? Do they need
Yeah.
a promotion? Do they need to be promoted out of the company?
Yep.
I mean, all those things, because I swear people spend a lot of energy pounding square pegs into round holes.
They do, and you think about, and it kind of gets to the mix of people and the right mix of talent together.
Yeah.
We've seen some of these superstar teams. They put people together who are so talented, but they can't play together as a team.
Yep.
And the importance of finding those balance of finding the roles, maximizing the value that other people have. You know, one of the things in my career I've noticed and really looked for is I call people who are multipliers. They're not only great themselves, they make the other people around them great. And
That was the special
creating,
sauce of Michael Jordan, for
yeah,
instance.
exactly. It's about creating those environments where you allow that to flourish.
Exactly, where the cis are welcomed and
Exactly.
and and part of
Yep.
the culture.
Yep.
Yeah. What gets in the way of that? What's the problem there?
Gets in the way of that? A lot of things. We've talked a lot about them already. Um, Tyranny of the now, egos.
Ego is a big one, right?
Ego is a huge one. This is the way we've always done it. Biases.
Institutional blindness.
Your biases.
Yeah.
This person does this. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Well, if you think that's all somebody can do,
Right.
and we're all guilty of those things, and we'll continue all being guilty of those things. And so it's about creating these systems, and that's where the I power again comes in and helps find those biases. Not only your biases you have about yourself, unlocking, helping to figure out the biases people have against you.
Right. Absolutely.
Super powerful.
Well, and again, the benefit of the model is it's covering the entire spectrum of our personal power.
Yeah.
It goes all the way, all the areas that are we're gonna find,
Yeah.
whatever is holding you in place, whatever your traps in, or whatever the thing that we call the initial layer is called the corrosions layer. And that's the thing that really we bleed most of our power by being trapped. We don't see our own way that we're doing
Yeah.
it just by taking little bits of action and freeing ourselves from whatever that place is.
Yeah.
And I always ask people, you ever make a New Year's resolution and not keep it?
Yeah.
And almost everybody,
Yeah.
admits
Yeah.
to that. And the question I always have as a follow-up is why?
Yeah.
Why can't you decide to do
Right.
something and do it?
Right.
And that's because we're complicated,
Yeah.
right? We think we know ourselves, but we really don't.
Yeah.
And it's true. We think we know our business.
Yep.
We think we know our organization.
Yep.
You do. Kind of.
Yep.
Kind of. You see the part sticking up out of the water.
Yeah.
You don't see the part under the
Yeah.
water that you don't see. And we need humility to respect
Yeah.
that fact.
Yeah.
And we need to be, so what are we supposed to do about all that? Well, the thing I say almost all the time is we need to adopt the attitude of discovery, exploration, and play.
Yeah.
In other words, we need to be willing to have the fun of experimentation.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That means taking chances. That means trying new things. That means being being more in the question business than the answer business.
Yeah.
And being in the people business as it relates to what can this person actually do?
Yeah.
And the best leaders will always ask more,
Yeah.
always see what the person can't see about
Yeah.
themselves.
One of the things we didn't talk about is the perspective of how to get all your individuals thinking they own this business.
Yes. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, and we kind of hit on this in the fact that we're all mutually here together because we want a result. And part of that means that I have power. I am here as an individual helping this organization. I think about it as if it is my organization. I am treated with respect. I have autonomy to be able to do my job in certain ways. And what does that mean in a team basis? It doesn't mean I can do whatever the hell I want, that's for sure. But it does mean, this exploration of people working together to unlock their abilities together, and grow. And so, that's at the core of a vision of this is these teams of people who are working together, really at high performing teams.
Absolutely. And when you're in that place of autonomy, empowerment,
Mhm.
you get the best. Again, I go back to these studies, right? There was a study, I'm blanking right now on whether it was Stanford or Yale or somebody, but they they did a study in classrooms, and it was a study. Actually, the study they told the teachers the study was on the students, but it was actually on the teachers, where they told the one group of teachers that they had a very high performing group of students. They weren't really the high performing; they
Right.
were the low performing. And they told another group of teachers that they're getting the low performing,
Right.
and they were actually high performing
Right.
students. And over time, the curves just they crossed each other,
Right.
right? The
Right.
low performers start outperforming the high performers,
Right.
which all to tell you that how we set our expectations for other people
Yeah.
is massive.
Yeah.
It makes all the difference. So for leaders listening to us right now, you're not expecting enough of your people. I'll say that right now.
Yes.
Your people can do way more than what you think and
Yep.
what they think.
Yep.
And that's one way you can get in the growth business and the exploration business and in the fulfillment business, by simply just moving the needle on what you
Yeah.
expect out of people.
Yeah.
That's just a free bit of advice.
Yeah.
Just do that.
Absolutely. Again, that wraps up into the core of what the eye of power is. Doing that, we have a system for helping and enable that to happen.
And what people can do is so far beyond what they think they can do, and what we've seen us, whoever you are, no matter how accomplished, no matter where you are, you're a shadow of what you could be as it relates to your fullest potential.
Yeah.
And so part of that the fulfillment business is really being in some sort of enterprise where you're taking your unique talents, you're developing them, and you're putting them to service to other people, and in a positive spiral, in a positive loop, that you're getting better, your value keeps getting higher, and you find new and better ways to reach parts of yourself and express parts of yourself that are there from the get. And so if you're in that business, no matter what the organization's charter is, you're well on your way to having a very high level culture. So, Greg,
Yeah.
thank you so much for this discussion.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I think we talked a bit about. Hopefully, people are seeing what it means to engage with the eye of power as a enterprise. We start small, we kind of ease into things, but we'll also engage with the leaders of the organization and make sure the ground is fertile for the work that we've been talking about. And it's kind of a new model where it's a subscription based sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Where people can invest. You don't have to invest a lot of, you bring in consultants, and some people might get sticker shock. We've got a flexible model where we do consulting, of course, but we've got a wide range where we can meet people where they are.
Absolutely. I think, and that's the one thing I'm excited about is, at the core of this is serving and helping people. And I'm looking forward to I think about this year coming up, and I'm super excited about the people that we're going to meet, the people that we're going to help. And that is something that is so energizing and something I'm really thankful.
Me too, Greggy. We have different types that we're working with so far. Small organization, like small association, more of a sort of a blue collar team. We're in financial world. We're in scholastic world, and we're finding sort of different aspects and different ways in these different worlds. But no matter where you go, people are people.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. As long as you're dealing with people, these principles hold.
Absolutely.
And we can definitely help move the organization into a higher place where people are just feeling more seen and fulfilled.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being with us today on the special edition of the Eye of Power podcast.
Thank you.
This has been the Eye of Power podcast with Tom Dardick. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to thank my brother, Scott Dardick, for the music and his music production. If you'd like to reach me, simply email Tom at dardickcommunications.com.